Today's Manna. 가스펠라이프 철치 데니얼 김 목사가 보내드리는 시간입니다.
Hello to the friends and family of KCBS. My name is Daniel and welcome to today's Manna. In the book of Galatians chapter 6 from verse 7 until 9, it says, "Whatever one sows, that will he also reap." You know, there's something fascinating about the way that God designed growth. A farmer doesn't wake up one morning and plant a seed and expect a harvest that afternoon, but he plants, he waters, he waits, and he protects, and he continues. And eventually, what was happening beneath the surface begins to appear above the surface. And the same principle is true spiritually. Our lives are constantly being shaped by what we repeatedly give our attention, our time, affection, and energy to. And every day, we're planting something. The question is not whether you're sowing. The question is, what are you sowing? You know, you may not realize it, but your habits are actually forming you. The things that you watch are forming you. The conversations you repeatedly have are forming you. And the people you surround yourself with are forming you. The people and the thoughts you allow to stay in your mind are forming you as well. And you know, and eventually what is being planted privately begins to show up publicly. A person doesn't suddenly become patient in one day, and patience has usually been cultivated through hundreds of small moments where they chose not to react. And a person doesn't suddenly become generous, and generosity is cultivated through repeated decisions to open their hands. A person doesn't suddenly become spiritually mature, and the spiritual maturity is developed through ordinary, often unnoticed decisions to pray, obey, forgive, serve, confess, worship, and trust God. We often want dramatic transformation without a daily cultivation. We want the harvest without the planting. We want the character without the discipline. We want the peace without surrender. And we want intimacy with God without making space for God. But growth doesn't usually happen dramatically. It actually happens gradually. Which is why Paul writes to us in Galatians chapter 6, verse 9, saying this, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." And I love the phrase when he says, "if we do not give up." Because sometimes you're doing everything right and nothing seems to be happening. You're praying and you don't see the change. You're choosing integrity. It doesn't seem to be rewarded. You're serving faithfully, but nobody seems to notice. And you're trying to be more like Jesus, and you still see so much brokenness in yourself. You're trying to love somebody, you're trying to forgive someone, become more patient, and yet you still find yourself struggling. You know, I want to encourage you here for a second. Don't assume nothing is happening simply because you can't see the harvest yet. Root actually grow before fruit appears. God often does his deepest work beneath the surface, and I want you to take an example of a tree. You don't see the tree's roots getting deeper. You don't see the microscopic processes happening inside its cells, and you don't see the tree becoming stronger underground. But then a storm comes, and suddenly you start discovering that was invisible was actually incredibly important. And the same may be true of your life. Every time you choose prayer instead of panic, something is happening. Every time you choose forgiveness instead of bitterness, something is happening. Every time you choose obedience instead of convenience, something is happening. And every time you worship God when circumstances are not perfect, something is happening. And every time you tell the truth when lying would be easier, something would be happening, because I believe that you are becoming someone. And the question is whether you're becoming more like Jesus. And that's why we have to pay attention to what we feed. Because whatever you continually feed will eventually become stronger. The battle of spiritual formation is often happening in a very ordinary moments. The question that I want to ask you is this: what do you think when you're alone? What do you do when you're frustrated? Who do you become when nobody's watching? Because those questions reveal what is actually being sowed and cultivated through you. And here's the encouraging part. You know, you can start planting something different today. You don't have to wait until January. You don't have to wait until your schedule calms down. You don't have to wait until you feel motivated, but you can begin one small decision. Open the Bible. Take 5 minutes of your quiet times. Apologize. Forgive. Turn off the phone. Encourage somebody. Be generous. Pray before reacting. choose gratitude. Take one step, take another, and then don't underestimate small beginnings because God is doing something what you cannot see.
지금까지 가스펠라이프 철치의 데니얼 킴 목사였습니다. 성경이나 예수 그리스도에 관해서 더 알기를 원하시는 분은 시카고 기독교 방송 전화 847-583 영원 구원으로 연락 바랍니다.